So let this be the first meditation in our journey, deep into the source of all of our worlds, and tapping the foundation, the source science, the missing code of all other codes. We saw in the opening, we're going to take 3 different meditations to go deeper and deeper. In this opening meditation, let us go listen to the wisdom, scriptures, enlightenment of our great traditions across the planet, 2,500 years. And I'll be putting on this little flip chart a kind of visual as in our meditation. It's not information, it's a visual, a meditative visual to help us see the evolution of our journey as humans through the eyes of global wisdom, the wisdom of all the endowment of our planet, the great scriptures, wisdom, enlightenment teachings. Because the journey of humanity, of rationality, as rational logosapiens, to use a Greek term logos, logosapiens, is to see that we until we touch the source of our being, of our reality, which is called first philosophy. First philosophy is the source science, the science of all sciences, because it's getting to the fundamental reality out of which all of our diverse worlds and traditions and scriptures and cultures and political forms of life, our education, our parenting, every aspect of our lives comes out of that field. And if we cut off from it, the wisdom, the collective wisdom of our planet has been teaching us century after century, 2,500 years. We need to mature from the dominant forms of thinking and technologies of consciousness and self-making and word-making and world-making with our minds. The ultimate technology we humans have is our mind, how we use it, the level of our language. Are we tapping the source reality? Are we tapping the source word power and mind power and ontology power? Ontologies is the word for being, the science of being. And so what I'll do in this first meditation, building on what we saw in our preface, in our prologue, is that the first movement would be to bring out the source science and understand that we need to upgrade our level of thinking and word power and mind power and experience making power, world power, culture power, in order to tap the source. And that is first science, first philosophy. And in that journey, we'll see that our great teachers and scriptures have been taking note with alarm that our stage of human development across the planet, where we talk about things and name them and put information and look at information that is presented on the screen of our awareness, where we make our worlds, ourselves, our cultures, our human relations, our politics, that if we're cut off from the source, and our technology can cut us off from the source, when that happens, we're going to suffer in profound ways. And our great teachers saw that. And what I'd like to do is to show that why it is that in the light of our global wisdom, the place of self-evidence, where we have self-evident truth, we have to go deep to get that, where we see our true human nature, in the light, the wisdom of the source and the code that we need to tap the source, which has been eclipsed by our dominant forms of thinking. So in this meditation, come with me, and we'll just quickly, in about 20 minutes, get a flash into the source wisdom that has not yet been clearly seen, where we find the unifying power and the source of all of our worldviews and words and narratives and forms of life, with all of our rich diversity, which is sacred. If we understood the importance of diversity in all of our rich diversity, still we're deeply connected in a pluribus unum, to use a Latin, e pluribus unum, out of the many one. Let's go there and see why our dominant forms of thinking and mental processing, a motherboard, so to speak, has been cutting us off from source and generating profound existential, ontological, that's a very powerful word, in our being. We've been broken, fragmented, polarized, and unable to connect truly with ourselves, with our source, with our environment, and with the deep culture that awaits us as awakened human beings. So let's look at this visual to kind of capture, because as we look across the planet at our great traditions, we find that the deepest wisdom and scriptures and enlightenment has been seeing, rightly, that what's on the ground floor of reality is infinite. And if we really got and had the technology and the code to process that, not in our normal ways, we can't get that, but if we go deep into the source science and get the code of the source, we're able to see the magnitude of recognizing that reality is an infinite field of infinite flow that cannot be broken, cannot be fragmented, that has infinite diverse names, narratives, pathways to approach it, and yet they must all connect in the power of the infinite unum, or unity of the source. That has been missing and eclipsed. And yet if we see it, astounding revelations and disclosures begin to come out. So let's just try to put this up and see, and to see that at the deepest level, what's first is infinite. We'll use the sign of infinity. Whether we call it Yahweh, or Om, or Allah, or Tao, or Brahman, or Logos, Logosophia, the Greek name for the fundamental reality that is the source of the light of reason, the light of the mind, the light of the word. In the beginning is the Logos, in the beginning is the word, in the beginning is Om. However we put that, Yahweh, Allah, these names for what is first, the infinite, the Unum, let's write it that way. And I'm going to put double markers around it to remember that we're in this deep space. This is the space of what is first. And even the word being, ontos, reality, is what is first. Because once we realize, with the right code, getting the code of what is first, not the more derivative codes that I'll put down here in a moment, but when we get the code of what is first, and really meditate, we cannot talk about it, we've got to meditate and tap the infinite, and because we're part of and implicated deeply in the infinite unum, or unity, which is infinitely diverse. So what you begin to see is, once you begin to get the logic, the science of the infinite, and it has many diverse first names across the planet, all with integrity, when it's tapping the space, right, the unum, they're connected necessarily. Why? And here, this is what I'd like to say is the most important missing piece of revelation, or disclosure, or insight, or of science, that the infinite cannot be divided. If there's anything I've seen over 50 years of living and teaching and being in a laboratory of these great first names and first philosophies, they all recognize, it's basic, all the theologies and cosmologies across the planet that are genuinely going into the first field, the fundamental reality, begins to see that you cannot divide the infinite. You cannot have two infinites. Basic, elementary ABC science. Because if you had two infinites, each would limit the other and exclude the space of the other, and therefore, by its very nature, it's contradictory and incoherent and a gross fallacy to posit two infinites. There can only be one. And how one is it? It's infinitely one. That's what unum means. Unum means infinite one, not one the way we would say it in our everyday culture. When we say we're all one, or all God, or all names for God are one. When we speak that way, or we are the world, or this sense of unity here, we'll see in a moment, is derivative. And it's cut off somehow by the technology we're using. We need source technology to really get to tap and enter into this amazing sacred space of reality itself. So if we use the God name, for example, whether you Brahman, God, or whatever name you use, if you want to speak of God, and we don't have to use God names. We don't have to use Yahweh name, or Allah name, or Om, or Brahman, or any of these names. If we use the Greek Logos, that in a way is not a God name, even though John in the Gospel opens in the beginning as the Logos was with God, and the Logos was God, that kind of talk. That logic is inevitable and inexorable. Because the infinite being infinitely one, infinitely unum, is infinitely pluribus. And this is very hard to understand, because the infinite is sourcing all possibilities. It cannot not. That is the very meaning of being infinite. The infinite is infinitely one. It's infinitely diverse. It's not limited in number. And when you begin to do the science, say all of the theologies across the planet, theology is one version of trying to understand the science of theos, the first. One version of first philosophy, first science. If we can get the code for this space, the unum code, the logos code, the reality code of being, ontos, is being, then everything else in our cultures, everything that's derived, is going to be coming out of that and coded with it. But if we'll see, if we're somehow eclipsed, and that's what that line means, if we somehow are in a culture space where we live and make our cultures in the space, this is, consider this the information screen of our lives. Our cultures are happening here. In the Greek philosophy, it's called predication. We join when we thought, here is the thinker, and here is a screen of our consciousness. And we, the people, are using a technology here that somehow we don't realize is cutting us off somehow from direct access into this fundamental space. And I'll use double parentheses here. So if you can cross this line into the source, we would have to use the technology that I'm indicating, where we have to really see that everything is interconnected. So that's one first meditation, that on the ground floor, reality is infinite. Why? Because if you try to draw a boundary, for example, right, it's incoherent, because what's on the other side of a boundary? A boundary implies the infinite, because there's always the other side of beyond the boundary, and there's no boundary to it. That means it's finite is here. When things are here defined and definite, it is cut off from the infinite, and it's put here. And the journey of all our great wisdom teachers and scriptures and enlightenment is we need to cross from this place, across this great deep boundary that we don't sufficiently understand the depth of it. And in different traditions it's named differently, that line. But it's an all-important line, because the teachings realize that if this is a space of reality, and this is the infinite space, and it's infinitely unified in Unum, and the Unum is filled with pluribus, that because all of diversity is still connected in the infinite Unum, it cannot not be. Which is astounding, basic ABC, because all of the first names, and they're infinite first names, you can't limit. That's the point. When you begin to get the signs of the infinite, you realize it leads to infinite presence. And that's astounding. It means we here cannot push the infinite away. So we are always surrounded by the infinite space. This is huge. Whatever is going on in our cultural lives, whatever, we have all diverse narratives. Our narratives are here, our worldviews are here, our belief systems are here, our interpretations of reality are here. And we have many different lenses of the mind. And if you have, say, a Newton lens, you'll have a Newton world. You have an Einstein lens, you have Einstein. If you have an Om lens, a yoga lens, if you have whatever, idealism, you have an idealism. Materialism, you have, and all of these different worlds are possible in this technology of talk about it. We think about it. This is an about. So when we use language like Socrates is wise, I have a thought. Socrates is wise. I'm joining those two concepts. That's a sentence. And it could be in any different language. We have so many infinite languages across the planet, and so many different worldviews and belief systems, all vying in this technology. This is a technology of thinking, of trying technologos, trying to get to the logos. And it's an amazing development to have information and to process information and beliefs and thoughts and hopes and fears and intentions all going on in this mental space, which pictures our world. Because if I think snow is white, I have a thought, snow is white. Or let's say I'm thinking in different languages. It is raining, English, il pleut, French, es regnet, German. All of these sentences are capturing a deep thought, and that's what logos science logic tries to understand, the deep thought, the content. I have a thought that pictures the world out there, the facts. And so the thinker, the word processing, the language, the concepts, the codes and memes that make our culture here are picturing and representing. This language represents. Language at this level, thought, is representational. It presents a picture of something else. But when you cross into this deep space, because of the infinite Unum connectivity, any item, if I say I here, and there's an other here, because of the infinite connection, I and other are Unum. This is called the I-thou space. And this is called the I-it, because I face an object, and the object is an it, and I and it, and all of my life and my relations and others are processed with my lens, and I see it, and I'm somehow disconnected. And so I'm going to use a different color just to help us see this, that when we're in this space, we're having a mind operating system. I'm going to mark it in red, that comes with this line that we draw, that cuts us off from the source. And if we go into the call of Yahweh, the voice, the infinite, where the infinite calls out to the people, put me first. Hear, O Israel, the Lord is one. It's Unum. The infinite is Unum. Reorient yourself, because when you're in this technology, you're privileging it, you're putting it first. Never mind it's cut off from a direct access, it's alienated, it's separated. So in the biblical tradition, this line represents an ontological human condition across the board. Call it sin. Sin is a cut from source. It's alienation from the source. And there's a fall and disgrace from the source into this place which is focused on the tree of knowledge, the object of knowledge, these thought forms that we have, belief systems, worldviews that generate our cultures and our relations and our politics and our lives and how we raise our children and our education. It's all going on here. And the multiple worlds, there's profound diversity of worlds and worldviews, across the planet. And we don't know how to talk to one another, because somehow when you break off from the Unum, you lose the circuits of connection. We can't fake it. We can't connect deeply. If you're saying it's Big Bang, no, it's Genesis, those two worldviews are so incompatible, it seems, here. Because the law, the technology of consciousness here divides and separates. Everything has a name. That's the whole point. Everything has an ID code that makes it stand on its own as a separate, which seems very innocent. But our great teachers were calling out to humanity, evolving here, which is a great level of evolution, to have information technology and belief systems and worldviews and codes and ideologies. They're all here. An ideology is a belief system that my culture, is holding on to as truth. And it's alleged that dominates the space of reality, because truth is presenting reality. It pictures it. But if we stand back and take the journey into deep source wisdom, the call of Yahweh or Allah or Om or Tao, the Chinese wisdom went, Tao Te Ching, the Lao Tzu is seeing the name for the field as the Tao. And the Tao that is named in our everyday language is not the Tao. The Om, this is called predication, to predicate, to join subjects and predicates and make information. This is predication technology. This is meditation technology. In meditation, we enter into the direct encounter. We're in the zone, to use that metaphor from when the musicians are jazzing and they become the jazz. When the runner is running and she is the running. When the soccer team is clicking and we are, the force is with us, the force is here. That's the source force. That's the truth force. That's the being force. That's a reality force. And yet, this technology, I've marked in red, I'm calling that the motherboard. To borrow from the digital world, a motherboard is the operating system of the mind. It's a technology of processing word, mind, my lens, my interpretations, my world, my beliefs are all in that technology, which is being shown here, which cuts us off, because it's using an operating system that names everything and acts as if it's separate, so that in a way, I am a separate being. I've got my own being. And everything I name has its own name tag. Call it out. Space is space. Time, motion, color, figure, texture, I, you, everything has its own ID tag. And in my journey as a first philosopher, I saw that the great wisdom teachers are trying to desperately say, don't get stuck here, because it's going to divide and break. It's going to be a Tower of Babel. We're not going to have dialogue, we'll have monologue. This is a place of monologue. To truly connect our worlds and our diversity, we need to go into the logos. Dialogos. Dialogue is dialogos. Via logos. Via Sophia. Sophia being the name, the feminine name for the embodiment of wisdom. So the feel of nature and reality. Sophia, logos Sophia. One word. Unum. For the infinite. So all reason comes from the Logos, from Allah, from Yahweh, from Brahman, from the Buddha calls it emptiness. Let's put the Buddha's name for it, the Dharma of Buddha, Shunyata. Emptiness is the Buddha's name for the Dharma, the Buddha Dharma. The Buddha Dharma is a law. So in Buddha's case, when Buddha saw that people are suffering, and Buddha's whole mission, when he saw that the people are broken and their being is broken. Buddha is an ontologist, ontos, being. Ontology is the science of being. And these ontologists are trying to see that if humans are stuck and caught in this mind operating system, a motherboard which you can't see because we're looking here, we're not able to see deeply into the mind operating process that dominates and shapes all of our lives and relations and cultures and generates all kinds of abysmal violence. Holocaust, genocides, racism, sexism, homophobia, all of the phobias, all of the objectification of each other, the reduction of each other, the treating others as objects, all of that is a form of violence. This operating system is a form of violence, and if we mature and cross into the space of connectivity, that's compassion, that's ethics, that's spirituality, that's sacred religious life. We're in sacred space of deep dialogue. No matter how much we wish to, we are good people, but if we are dominated by this regime of consciousness, it's a kind of colonization of the human space. Our cultures coming out of this space are colonized by a regime that holds us together. It's a convention, it's a code, it's a meme, whatever name we use for the mind operating process, right? It's in that technology that we make our culture. And so this place is interrelational, interrelativity. This is separate identities. And so when we cross from this level of language and consciousness into this space, from X to X, where we're in the deep space of connectivity, in the connected flow of dialogue, we cross from monologue into dialogue, and that's where human compassion lights up. That's the source science, the source of reality. Reality is infinite, infinite is infinitely one, it's infinitely diverse, and yet that diversity is woven together. And that is the basic law of the source field. And you can't process it here. You've got to cross into this space. So all of these great traditions are saying, how do we cross over from this technology into this technology? The technology of unum pluribus, where everything is interwoven. Why is it interwoven? The answers are given over and over in different ways. So when Yahweh calls out to Abraham, right? Love me, put me first things first. Honor the first, because then alignment of knowledge and science and wisdom and enlightenment really works, and we're in the flow of nonviolence. And so the call of Yahweh to us, all of us, Abraham, who's operating for all of the human family, is that you're going to let go of Isaac, metaphor for your attachment to your son, and therefore to your mind operating, which is slicing and violating presence. The infinite is infinite presence. I know I'm juggling a lot of different first fundamental themes at the same time, and I'm doing that intentionally. I'm juggling and dancing across these different narratives and great breakthroughs, these are great technologies and teachers and pioneers to help us cross from the alienated to the home. The Om base, the home base, the Christ space, the Om in yoga, for example. So the call to Abraham, which is all of us, to recognize that we are cut off and we're attached, is calling for detachment. We've got to detach from this ensnarement in a regime that holds us captive and causes suffering and breakdowns in humanity and in ourselves, because I am cut off from myself. Myself is here, my high self, my source self. We all are source sapiens. And in a way, if you just take an example of the founding of 1776, the language of the opening of the Declaration, we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all humans are endowed by the Creator with unalienable rights, life, liberty, freedom, happiness is well-being. Happiness is well-being. And our being, if it's broken, cut off, and fragmented, we are suffering. Our being is ill. We are in ill being. And if our being is ill, we cannot flourish. We cannot be happy. Happiness is not a mental state here. Happiness is a condition of surfing into the zone where we are connected with each other, with the field, with nature, and most of all, with the source. Call it God, call it Brahman, call it the field, Tao, Om, Chi, any name you use for the infinite force. When we're in the source and the force is with us, and we are with the force, and that's, for example, Gandhi. Here is the high self, the Atman, in the Om language, the Brahman language, the Bhagavad Gita, one of our great scriptures. The voice of Om, Lord Krishna, is speaking to Arjuna here, who is broken down in a war. And Arjuna drops his weapon and Krishna speaks to him in a dialogue. That's the Bhagavad Gita. And Krishna realizes that when Arjuna matures to the point of his breakdown, to see this is not working, Krishna knows he's ready for the education to take these steps of yoga, to go into the space of the unified field. You have to open your first eye. We may call it the third eye from this point of view, but it's the first eye. It's the source eye. And yoga is to let go of this dominant. Yoga is letting go of this technology, not just what's in the box. People keep looking at the box. When we hear these great teachings, what we typically do we bring it down into our space where we can process it in our language. We privilege our level of technology and information and interpretation of every word. So if we hear scripture, the word of God is not the word of humans here. And yet we seem to inevitably download this word of the infinite flow of scripture into our word. And we lose it. You don't write the name of God here. If you write the name of the infinite here, you're violating the infinite. You can't contain and package the infinite in our language of talking about it. You've got to enter into it, into direct intimacy with it. So just look at all of these great wisdom. Abraham is called to let go of Isaac, attachment. We have to detach, we have to separate. And we'll see in the 1776 opening of the Declaration in our third meditation. We'll look at it. I'll share the words. It's amazing when we look at the opening language of July 4th, 1776. It's going to be amazing to see it through the eyes of the source, the place of self-evidence, where all humans are created equal in their diversity. So, unum is pluribus. It's one concept. Multiplicity, diversity, is inherent within infinite unity. It's not that we have unity and then diversity. That's incoherent. That's not the logic and science of the infinite, of source. The infinite is infinitely diverse with infinite names. Please, theology has affirmed this. First philosophies across the planet realize when you start to really not think about the first here, you can't do it here. When you enter authentically into the meditative, high voltage technology of what interconnectivity and can handle that, you begin to see the infinite is infinitely unum, infinitely connected in its diversity. And any name that you have here, when you put it up here, it has to go infinite. So if you say love, God is love. Goodness, goodness. Logos is goodness. Knowledge, infinite knowledge. Why? Because you can't, in this derivative language, you cannot get the science that every name is coming out of this. That's why we couldn't have our world and our life without the source. So this infinite surround, which cannot be bound, it's infinite, is infinite interconnectivity. So Lord Krishna, in the voice of Om, is speaking to Arjuna and saying, Arjuna, you're ready now to go. Let me guide you into the technology to let go of this, separate from this, so you can access and dilate your Logos eyes, your Brahman eyes, your Om eyes, your Christ eyes, and experience the deep interflow of being in the zone with the source and with each other. So these are some insights I want to just get out. We tend to put this first, and we start off here. Then if we try to do that, we're already loading this into this, and that is just stalled at the wall. We're stalled at the barriers on the walls. And that's been going on chronically in the human situation. If we see things in our world, we want to be activists, and we say, well, check out the global warming. Check out the nuclear weapons. And it's true. We're in crisis. These are dangers. We can sabotage and destroy, self-destruct in so many ways. Our economy can implode. Our political life and civic space can be broken. We can't have democracy here. We'll see in the third meditation. Democracy is crossing into dialogue, where you have the pluribus unum. That mantra that is, for example, inscribed in the American penny, e pluribus unum, out of the many, one. One nation, under logos, under source, indivisible, with dignity and life and happiness and well-being for all. We can't be free here. So it's an alarming disclosure of first science, first philosophy, that if there is a motherboard that's cutting us off from source, and we can habitually, chronically keep downloading the source science into this space which violates it, and we're slashing the source by staying here, and each other. In our second meditation, I'll try to build on this, and show why is it that this technology here of naming things with identity and separating them off as if they're separate atoms. An atom in philosophy, in first philosophy, is a unit that alleges to be existing on its own. And science here says there's no atom in that sense. There's anatomic. Any unit here is connected with every other. If you have time here, then past is past, present, and future. But if you go into time here, zone time, every point touches every other point. That's what happens in the source technology space. Every moment is connected. 8 billion years. Let there be light, however far you go back. When this calls out for the world to open, right, it's happening now. So the power of now is here. Not in this time. You've got to go into deep time, Om time, Christ time, Buddha time, Zen time. This language is a different language. It's not that if I say snow is white here, I need a different language. We need to understand the deeper operating motherboard here. Because when you say snow is white, or the winter is filled with spring. Any word you have here which cuts off, when you put that word or sentence here, it opens up. So when Jesus is saying, I'm the way, I'm the truth, I'm the life, he's meaning double bracket life. He's calling the humans that are cut off and living here to let die to this. You've got to separate. Jesus is saying we've got to separate from the dominance of our sin script. It's a script. In the East, it's called samsara. So there's a name for this technology across the planet. In Eastern philosophy and wisdom, samsara is a condition of alienation from reality and truth and being and knowledge and science that keeps repeating itself over and over ad infinitum in the human condition. That's suffering continues repeatedly ad nauseum. And the journey of wisdom, whether it's Buddha's or yoga or Zen, is to discover this, see it, and let it go and separate so we can rise into compassion and care and mutuality and sacredness and well-being and life, liberty, happiness, and well-being in this space. As free, dignified, noble logosapiens. Here we're more egocentric in my own separate ego mental space as a separate being. But here we're not ego-sapien, but logosapiens. We're logos, rational beings. So reason itself has been downloaded in an artificial form in our forms, what we call reason. It's not deep reason because we're not in the unum that connects. We're not in the logos. So Plato, the teacher, the student of Socrates, looking for wisdom to go to the logos, realizes that we have to journey. If we're going to enter wisdom, to go deeper and deeper until we tap the logos, then we tap the light and we see the connectivity of our world and each other. And that's where we form democracy. Plato saw that until there's wisdom in the culture, in the polis, there cannot be justice. There cannot be truth, there cannot be well-being. We've got to tap the logos, and that's where the culture opens up. So in this opening meditation, I wanted to just get that out and help us to see, wow, people don't get this. They don't know. And I introduced some decades ago in my research and listening, we had to find a way to mark when we're here and when we're here, because if we don't, we put them together and conflate them. This is conflated into our language, and we lose it, and we remain stuck. And I used double brackets I introduced to say that now you're in the source script, the source world, the source culture, the I-thou space, where everything is interconnected. Why interconnected? Because everything is in the infinite unum is interlinked, and there are no atoms that are separate. It's all connected. So with time, all moments touch in the now, which is presence. This is world shaking and world making if we understand that we can't get around the infinite. It's infinitely one. It's infinite through and through. So every word we haven't put here, right, it goes to the infinite force. So how much space? Infinite space. How much time? Infinite time. Is space and time connected? Obviously. Space-time. It's a continuum. How about mind and word? Is mind and word connected? Yes. Mind-word. Is soul and body connected? Mind-body, soul-body. Everything is interwoven. This is non-dual, holistic, integral intelligence, and this is disintegral. So if we're trying to find integral intelligence and integral reason, we've got to go into the integral calculus. So double brackets is a place where everything is interflow. We're in the zone where we can't see from the outside. We've got to immerse and rise into our higher mature self. And then we experience life in the zone, culture in the zone, religion, sacred practice, love, raising our children, educating our kids, being in politics with our neighbors with vast diversity, and yet unum. This is, in the case of America, for example, if America is dominated by this, we're still colonized. We'll see in the third meditation. And it's a form of violence. We cannot connect. The polis is going to be broken and fragmented and ungovernable. There is no we the people in an un-we space and technology, in a me space. To get to we, we've got to go into the deep I-thou space. From I to we is here. We the people. We connect. It doesn't mean we're melted down. No, we're scripted up into our real diversity, because every point in this field is an infinite locus or PowerPoint. And each of us occupies infinite. We hold a space which is fractal. It's not an atom separate, it's interconnected. I and thou are linked. So when Jesus was trying to get us to just get that to the disciples speaking this language, and Jesus is this word in the flesh. When I was in prison, you visited me. When I was hungry, you fed me. And the answer, when did we do that? When you tended to the least of mine, my other, you tended to me. Why? Unum, connection, I-thou. A human is an I-thou being. The thou is already connected and woven in. Every moment is woven in. Every place and locus. So across the vast distance, you go to Germany, you go to France, you go to New York and Los Angeles, and you go to Hong Kong, and you go to Hawaii, and you go to South Brazil, and you go north to Canada. Wherever you go, they're connected. The missing earth is here, not here. You can't objectify sacred earth, which is the body embodiment of the flow of the infinite. So again, all of these great teachers, the Tao that is named is not the Tao. Om, can't predicate it, we've got to meditate it. So yoga, philosophy, and teaching, first philosophy, yoga source science, is how do you go from an ego-based technology of talking about it and thinking about it and feeling it and so forth, to let that go and cross into, and that's when the first eye opens up, the eye of Logos, the eye of Sophia, the eye of wisdom, the eye of enlightenment, the eye of Christ opens up, and you encounter the deep, abysmal, miraculous flow of sacred space. That's yoga. Buddha, he saw what people are suffering. And when Buddha awoken to enlightenment, he brought 4 axioms, source wisdom axioms, from this space to us here. That existence is suffering. The first axiom. It has a cause. Clinging to this. We have a choice, separation. We can separate from it. It's an addiction. And this addiction is causing our ill-being. Our being is ill. And to heal that medically, we need source medicine, and we cross by, how do we cross into the Buddha Dharma? The law of ethics, of interconnectivity, of nature is Dharma. We have to practice mindfulness, sourcefulness. We need to rehabilitate our mind from a smotherboard that's holding us back and cutting us off into a sacred, open Buddha space of compassion, of connectivity, a Christ space, a Tawa, Allah space, all of Allah. Islam is surrender to Allah. It's right in the tradition of Abraham. Judaism, Christianity, Islam, children of Abraham. Why? Because We're following the principle of separation to put this first. Yahweh, Allah first, Christ, God first. Socrates is seeing that wisdom is leaving the cave and moving into the logos, into the light, and that's where we know thyself. Yourself is here. It's not in the box. It's not dominated by this. It's in the logos. You need the logos code to tap yourself. And that's when we say, I am, in this language. You can say, I am here, but you're still not there. So to say I am, you've got to cross. When Descartes saw that all of this could be doubted, and he dropped his own story, and he said, I am, he crossed into the zone. Meditative space. First, his meditations on first philosophy. First philosophy, source science. I am. And what he discovered is that the I am was not alone. The infinite thou, infinite being, was already holding him. So the I am is I thou. Those are different versions of the laboratory of source scientists and great pioneers and visionaries crossing into the technology of the source board. It's the true motherboard. Sophia, Logos, Om, Yahweh, Christ board. So to be a Christian is to make this crossing and to Christ here. To listen to the laws of God, Moses, right, and to follow the lead of Abraham is to be here. When Moses is on the mountain in the burning bush, he's here. The burning bush is not here, it's here, it's here. And in his dialogue with God, God gave him the laws. What? The commands that are all unum. They're all not separate list. It's all connected with love one another, love the source. Put the source first, Abraham and Moses. So to live the laws of God, we've got to cross into the space of God. We can't use our damaging technology that cuts us off and alienates us from flourishing in well-being. This is well-being, this is ill-being. I've gone on longer than I expected, but I hope you got a sense. I'm passionate about this because this is life and death. Because these great teachers saw the urgency for centuries that this is dominating, we're dominating human lives, cultures, religions, worlds, narratives are alienated from the source, and it's a place of suffering and violence. And it's really slashing the source. And so it's urgent, it has been urgent for centuries to let this go, see it, see this motherboard. Notice what its consequences, and that's our next meditation. I will pick up from the motherboard that dominates our everyday cultures, that thinks that every A is A, everything has its own ID. And we're living that. It's innocent, but it's devastating in its consequences. So in the next follow-up meditation, I'm going to go into the second theme. If you'll be able to follow this source science, the motherboard, cutting us off, this is human flourishing and maturation. This is the place of self-evidence in the light of Logos, where we hold these truths to be self-evident, that we're endowed by by the Creator, which is the infinite force, with these infinite names of Unum Pluribus. Unum Pluribus is primal and first, and that's when we have life, liberty, happiness, well-being, and we're called to that. So if America is dominated here, it has not yet matured as a culture in I-thou ethics and consciousness and sacredness, of sacred democracy, of deep dialogue, not monologue. We can't have true democracy, we the people, in a monologue space of culture and polis and life. We have to cross. So that crossing is detachment, separation. And that's really the language of the opening of the 1776 Declaration, just to focus on that. But we could go across the planet and look at all of these different calls of what is source. We've got to separate from codes and conventions and bans, cultural bans and political agreements, whatever name you use, that hold us together in a culture. If this is holding us back and violating our human rights to be and to be human and out ourselves as sacred beings, then it's our duty to separate from that. That echoes across the planet and through the ages. The call to separate from thought forms and technologies that sever us from our being and creates abysmal suffering and ill-being at the deepest ontological level of the source science. So let's just take a breath and stop at this point. Let this be the end of the first meditation in our trilogy And in the sequel, we'll now go into why is it that the motherboard that dominates our cultures here is really slashing and cutting us off and is the source of dysfunction and pathologies and abysmal violence in many forms when we're in this space. So we've got to pay attention, call this out according to our wisdom, and figure out how do we let this go and mature graciously and urgently into the space of being an awakened human. So I'll join you in the second meditation. Thank you.